Hi everyone, I'm here to share with you guys about watercolor painting. Personally, it is one of my favorite things to do, especially during just a little bit of free time that we have as college students. I try to make it a habit just on the breaks or maybe occasional weekend just to sit down and take some time to paint and just unwind the mind a bit, and just in the midst of all the papers and exams and tests, just to take a minute and breathe. And so I'm excited to share with you guys about watercolor today. I'm sure that many of you have had experiences with watercolor before throughout the years of school and art classrooms. It is definitely a staple for many elementary school classrooms as it's super easy to work with and stain resistant. That is a big thing for sure. And so yeah, watercolor can be described as a transparent or semi-transparent, kind of depends on who you're talking to, paint medium that is activated by water. So it's really easy to work with, honestly, and can be used by all ages, as really just depends on how much water you have on the page or how much water you have on your brush or even how much water is on your paint palette. It's kind of just a game of control, really, of how much water you have, and that will determine how much pigment you have on the brush and on the page. So yeah, it's a pretty easy medium to work with. There isn't much to be said about like specific brushes that needs to be used. Kind of depends on what you're looking to paint. If you're looking to paint maybe like a tree bark or maybe like a detailed ridge on a mountain, then a finer brush would probably serve you pretty well in that area. But if you're looking for maybe more of just a beautiful sea with a sunset, then maybe a more broader brush would be totally fine. And so yeah, there's not much there with the brushes. There is, I will say, a specific watercolor paper that many artists will use when doing with watercolor. It is kind of a thicker paper, and I'll show some in a bit to you guys. But yeah, it's a kind of a thicker paper that's textured and sturdy, really just to be able to keep up with the amount of water that's being put on the page and can soak in that pigmentation from the paint and not become too flimsy after it all, which I'm sure we know a lot of regular printer paper, once it's wet, it's basically done for. So they're trying to solve that problem with kind of the thicker watercolor paper. So yeah, I would like to share just kind of a few techniques that I typically use the most when doing my paintings. The first one is just the dry brush technique, and I have a little thing to show you guys. But basically what this entails is just having a very dry brush, just placing it right on the watercolor paint and just going at it on the page. And as you can see, it kind of creates a very fine textured look. And it's great when you're trying to do kind of more organic things, like here I have just a bush or maybe even a tree. It just kind of gives that natural kind of scratchy texture. And so yeah, I love doing landscapes, so it's a great technique to use to kind of bring that organic feel to all the different plants that I'm wanting to put on the page. But you can definitely use it for many other textures, maybe if you're trying to paint certain types of clothing or cloth or whatever else the case may be. This is a great technique to use. The next one that I typically use as well is the wet on wet technique, which is just getting your brush pretty much soaked, placing it into the paint and putting it straight on the page. And once you're done with one color, you move on to the next color that you want to use right away. And once again, you get the brush soaked, you place it right into the paint and then put it on the page. Usually you put it on top of the first color that you place down. That way you can kind of get this mix in between, as the water will activate both the paint that's on the brush and then the paint that was on the page. And especially because the paint that's already on the page is wet, it'll just blend the colors even more. So it's a great way to kind of get an organic mix, maybe like a night sky or a pretty sunset or even sunrise is a great way to get that kind of natural blending of colors. And kind of the last technique I like to use a lot is, it's called the splatter technique. This one's just a lot of fun to do, honestly. It's where you take a brush, just a little bit of water, just enough to get some paint on it, and you stick your finger out and you actually whack the brush against your finger, just light, kind of hovering above the page, and it'll produce kind of this speckled effect. And it is a great way to get like a really pretty night sky. I typically use it for like galaxies or just in the middle of the night around the moon or something like that. It's a great way to just get a lot of like organic little dots all throughout your painting. But yeah, those are kind of the three main techniques I use. One of the main things I just love about watercolor in general is something called layering. With watercolor, you can layer the color on top of itself. And so kind of an example for you guys here, you can see I did about 4 different layers here of the color orange, and you really just start out really light, and the further you go in, it just gets darker and darker. But the cool thing about it is that you're able to see just kind of the different layers through each other. And I guess one way I like to describe it is kind of like stained glass. It's just really pretty to see just kind of the natural, just the naturalness of the water all throughout the painting, and seeing just the different colors come through and one another. And so yeah, layering is kind of one of those unique things to watercolor that you don't see with acrylic paint. Acrylic paint is going to be a bit more like, once you paint over something, that's all you see. You're not able to see the color underneath. But with watercolor, you get to have that depth of color all throughout your painting. And so yeah, that's kind of one of my favorite things about watercolor. And just kind of a couple things that I love to do personally with watercolor is landscapes. Love doing landscapes, specifically mountains and trees, and also sunsets. Sunsets are some of my favorites. So you can see here kind of, I was able to use kind of the layering techniques with the mountains, just with the color purple on top of one another, and even in the sky, you do a really pretty gradient. And here again, I'm just kind of using that, just the layering technique, and just kind of that wet on wet, just trying to get that natural mixing of colors. But yeah, that's watercolor, and thank you so much for watching.